In the hushed silence of a forgotten archive, buried deep within the bowels of Oxford University, an extraordinary discovery has recently come to light. Among stacks of dust-laden documents and time-worn magnetic tapes, researchers unearthed something that would challenge everything we thought we knew about one of humanity's most brilliant minds. A shaky, yet unmistakably penetrating voice recording echoed across the decades, a whisper from another world. It was Stephen Hawking, but not the Hawking we knew from theoretical physics books or black hole lectures. This was a different man, stripped of academic conventions, speaking of territories considered taboo by mainstream science. The date stamped on the tape box indicated December 2017, just 3 months before his passing. The handwritten label, in a shaky scrawl, simply read, "For when there is no more time for pretense." What followed was a 47-minute intimate confession sealed by Hawking's explicit instructions, determined to be revealed only a century after his death. But fate, as he himself would theorize in this recording, has its own laws that transcend our human attempts to control it. Hawking began his confession with a voice that, though weakened by disease, carried an intensity he had rarely allowed the world to witness. He spoke of how, in the final years of his life, he had experienced phenomena that defied everything he had learned about the nature of reality. These were not hallucinations caused by medication or neurological deterioration, as some skeptics might suggest. They were experiences that arrived with crystalline clarity, sharper than any mathematical equation he had ever derived. The first of these experiences had occurred during a particularly difficult night in 2016. Hawking described how, while contemplating the vastness of the cosmos through his office window, he felt a familiar presence beside him. It wasn't a physical sensation, but something that transcended the limits of ordinary sensory perception. It was his mother, Isabel, who had departed decades earlier. She didn't speak with words, but communicated through what he described as pure language of consciousness, concepts and emotions that transmitted instantaneously without the need for spoken language. What struck him most about this encounter wasn't her presence itself, but the information she shared about the nature of consciousness's continuity. According to Hawking, his mother revealed that physical death was merely a transition between states of existence, similar to a quantum particle shifting from one energy state to another. Consciousness, she explained, through this transcendental communication, wasn't a product of the brain, as materialistic science insisted, but a fundamental property of the universe, as basic as gravity or electromagnetism. This revelation profoundly shook the scientific convictions Hawking had built throughout his career. He admitted in the recording that, initially, he had tried to rationalize the experience as a product of his stressed brain, a neurologically plausible explanation for something that defied his worldview. But other experiences followed, each more vivid and detailed than the last, until he could no longer ignore the possibility that he was confronting a dimension of reality that contemporary physics simply couldn't explain. The second major experience he described occurred during a meditation session, a practice he had secretly adopted in his final years, inspired by readings on quantum physics and consciousness that his academic status would never allow him to publicly acknowledge. During this meditation, Hawking reported experiencing what he could only describe as a dimensional expansion of perception. His consciousness had detached from the limitations of his physical body and journeyed through what he called interdimensional corridors. In this out-of-body journey, he had encountered a plane of existence where the laws of physics as we know them didn't apply. It was a realm where time wasn't linear, where past, present, and future coexisted simultaneously, and where consciousness could move freely between different points in time. More surprisingly, in this plane, he had encountered other scientists who had passed before him, Einstein, Tesla, Newton, all continuing their research in a dimension where the limitations of physical matter didn't restrict the exploration of truth. Einstein, according to Hawking, had explained that many of the theories they had developed on Earth were merely fragments of a much larger understanding of reality. Relativity, quantum mechanics, unified field theories, these were all just different facets of a single universal truth that could only be grasped when consciousness freed itself from the limitations of three-dimensional perception. Tesla had shown him visions of technologies based on the direct manipulation of consciousness, methods of instantaneous communication across dimensions, and forms of energy arising from the very fabric of conscious space-time. But the deepest revelation came from Newton, who had shared insights into the cyclical nature of existence. According to Newton, each soul undergoes multiple incarnations across different dimensions and eras, always with the purpose of expanding its understanding of universal truth. The life Hawking had lived on Earth was just one expression of his eternal soul, and the physical limitations he had faced were consciously chosen before his incarnation as part of a larger cosmic curriculum. The recording revealed that Hawking had begun to perceive signs of his approaching transition months before his physical death. These weren't medical signs, but spiritual phenomena indicating his soul was preparing to return to higher dimensions. He described visions of golden light appearing at the edges of his vision, ethereal melodies he heard during moments of profound silence, and a growing sensation of being gradually pulled towards something greater than his earthly existence. One of the most touching experiences he shared was about encounters with his daughter, Lucy, when she was a child. Not the adult Lucy who was alive, but the eternal essence of her soul that existed beyond linear time. These visits occurred in dreams that were more real than waking life, where he could embrace his daughter without the limitations of his physical body, where he could run with her through fields of pure energy, where he could express his love in ways that the limitations of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis had never allowed in physical life. In these experiences, young Lucy had explained to him that souls choose their families before birth, based on lessons they need to learn and contributions they can make to each other. His physical disability wasn't a punishment or a cosmic accident, but a courageous choice of his soul to accelerate his spiritual growth and inspire others through his example of transcending material limitations. Hawking admitted in the recording that these revelations had completely changed his perspective on his own life. The frustration he had felt about his physical limitations had transformed into a deep gratitude for the opportunity to experience the transcendence of consciousness over matter. Hawking admitted in the recording that these revelations had completely changed his perspective on his own life. The frustration he had felt about his physical limitations had transformed into a deep gratitude for the opportunity to experience the transcendence of consciousness over matter. He had begun to see his condition not as a prison, but as a laboratory to explore the non-physical nature of consciousness. The most transformative experience he described had occurred just weeks before recording this confession. During a particularly difficult night, when the physical pain had become almost unbearable, his consciousness had completely separated from his body and traveled to what he could only describe as the heart of the universe. It wasn't a physical place, but a state of being where all information, all energy, all the consciousness of the cosmos converged into a singular unity. In this state, he had experienced what mystics throughout history had attempted to describe as union with the divine. It wasn't an anthropomorphic god of organized religions, but an infinite cosmic consciousness of which all individual souls were temporary expressions. It was as if each person were an individual note in an infinite symphony, contributing their unique frequency to a harmony that transcended any individual understanding. During this transcendental experience, Hawking had understood that all his scientific research had been a form of prayer, an attempt by his soul to understand the mind of the universe. His equations on black holes were mathematical expressions of profound spiritual truths about the cyclical nature of creation and destruction. His theory on the evaporation of black holes through Hawking radiation was a metaphor for how individual consciousness eventually reintegrates with the universal cosmic consciousness. The recording revealed that he had begun receiving visits from beings that existed in higher dimensions, entities that had completely transcended the need for physical incarnation. These beings, which he described as architects of reality, had explained that the physical universe we know is only one of the infinite dimensions of existence, designed specifically as a school where souls can experience separation, individuality, and eventually rediscover their unity with the whole. According to these beings, each soul goes through a cosmic curriculum that can extend through thousands of incarnations on different planets, dimensions, and eras. Some souls choose lives of great intellectual achievement, others choose lives of quiet service, still others choose lives of suffering to accelerate their spiritual growth. The important thing wasn't the specific role each soul played, but the sincerity and love with which it played that role. Hawking shared that he had understood that his own soul had chosen his specific incarnation to serve as a bridge between science and spirituality. His impeccable scientific authority would allow his future revelations about the spiritual nature of reality to be taken seriously by minds that would normally dismiss such concepts as superstition. It was part of a larger cosmic plan to help humanity transcend the false dichotomy between science and spirituality. This revelation was being uncovered at precisely the right moment to inspire a new generation of truth seekers, people who are not content with merely material explanations for the mysteries of existence. For those who feel a deep thirst to understand not only how the universe works, but why it exists and what its deeper purpose is, there are many more discoveries waiting to be shared. If you resonate with these revelations and wish to continue this journey of discovery, be sure to subscribe to our channel, where we regularly bring to light other secret confessions and hidden documents from great minds who dared to explore the forbidden territories of reality. He described how, at the moment of transition, each person was greeted by loved ones who had passed before, not only from the current life, but from all past lives. It was a jubilant reunion of a spiritual family that extended across eons of existence. The period immediately after death was dedicated to a loving and non-judgmental review of the life that had just been completed, focusing not on mistakes or failures, but on lessons learned and love shared. Hawking shared that he had observed his own future transition process during one of his deepest experiences. He had seen how his consciousness would expand at the moment of leaving his body, how he would be greeted by his mother, his father, and many other loved ones, and how he would quickly understand the divine perfection of every moment of his earthly life, including and especially the moments of greatest physical difficulty. One of the most touching parts of the recording was when he spoke about messages he had received to share with his family after his passing. He had been instructed on specific signs he would send to demonstrate the continuity of his existence. Patterns of light, bird behavior, significant electronic malfunctions, and even sudden inspirations that his loved ones would receive during moments of deep longing. He explained that these post-mortem communications weren't supernatural or mystical, but natural expressions of how consciousness operates beyond physical limitations. Just as radio waves exist around us constantly but can only be perceived with the appropriate receiver, the communications of consciousnesses that had transcended the physical plane were constantly available to those who develop the sensitivity to perceive them. The recording also revealed insights into the true nature of physical reality. Hawking explained that he had understood that the entire material universe was essentially a holographic projection of the collective consciousness of all souls experiencing physical incarnation. The laws of physics that he had spent his career studying were the rules of this cosmic game that souls had established to create an experience of apparent separation and limitation. This understanding had revolutionized his perspective on the role of science. Instead of being a quest to understand an objective external reality, science was actually a way for consciousness to explore its own creative capabilities. Every scientific discovery was simultaneously a discovery about the nature of consciousness and a demonstration of the infinite power of the universal mind. Hawking shared that he had received visions of how the science of the future would be fundamentally different. Instead of studying matter as something separate from consciousness, future scientists would study consciousness as the fundamental substance from which matter emerges. Research instruments would be based on the amplification of intuitive perception rather than on the detection of external phenomena. Discoveries would be made through deep meditative states rather than solely through physical experimentation. He predicted that the very distinction between scientist and mystic would eventually disappear, as both were explorers of the same universal truth using complementary methodologies. The great advancements of the future would come from the integration of scientific rigor and spiritual openness, creating a new form of knowledge that would transcend the limitations of both scientific materialism and religious dogma. One of the most thrilling revelations concerned the existence of a cosmic library, where all the knowledge of all civilizations across all dimensions was stored. Hawking explained that he had accessed this library during his expanded states of consciousness, uncovering information about advanced technologies, cures for diseases, solutions to environmental problems, and methods for achieving world peace. This library wasn't a physical place, but a field of consciousness where information existed in pure form, accessible to any mind that developed the capacity to attune to its frequency. Many of history's greatest discoveries were partial accesses to this library by minds that, consciously or unconsciously, had expanded their perception beyond ordinary limitations. Hawking revealed that he had received specific information about cures for his own condition and many other diseases considered incurable by contemporary medicine. These cures were based on the understanding that all illness was fundamentally an energetic imbalance in the matrix of consciousness that created the physical body. Future healing methods would involve directly reorganizing this matrix through techniques combining focused intention, specific sound frequencies, and visualization of sacred geometric patterns. He explained that he had chosen not to pursue these cures for himself because his soul had determined that his greater contribution would come through the exemplary transcendence of his physical limitations, demonstrating that consciousness is truly independent of bodily conditions. His illness had been a tool chosen by his soul to accelerate his spiritual awakening and inspire others to question the apparent limitations of human existence. The latter part of the recording contained profound reflections on the purpose of life and the destiny of the human soul. Hawking explained that he had come to understand that each incarnation is an opportunity for the universal soul to experience itself from a unique and specific perspective. Through the apparent separation of individual incarnation, cosmic consciousness explores all possibilities of experience, growing in wisdom and compassion through each life lived. Suffering, which had been such a significant part of his own experience, was not a cosmic error or punishment, but one of the most powerful forms of spiritual growth available. Through transcending suffering, souls develop qualities like courage, compassion, perseverance, and faith that could not be developed in any other way. His own journey through the progression of his illness had been a masterclass in transforming physical limitations into spiritual expansion. He shared that he had understood the present moment is crucial in humanity's spiritual evolution. Humanity was in the midst of a consciousness shift that would move it from a perspective based on separation and competition to one based on unity and cooperation. This awakening was happening through individuals around the world who were rediscovering their spiritual nature and recognizing their fundamental interconnectedness with all life. Hawking concluded his confession with a message of profound hope. He explained that he had seen that, regardless of outward appearances, everything was unfolding perfectly according to a cosmic plan that ensures all souls would eventually return to a state of conscious unity with the divine. There were no lost souls, no ultimate failures, no eternal damnation. There were only infinite opportunities for growth, learning, and eventual awakening. He expressed deep gratitude for his earthly life, including every moment of pain and limitation, because he had understood that everything had been perfectly orchestrated to maximize his spiritual growth and his capacity to serve humanity's collective awakening. His imminent transition was not a loss, but a graduation to a higher level of existence where he could continue his work from a more expanded perspective.
The recording ended with Hawking expressing his unconditional love for all of humanity, and his confidence that each person would eventually discover their own divine nature. He encouraged those who would hear his message not to fear death, not to limit their conceptions of what is possible, and to always remember that they are far more than their physical bodies or their temporal circumstances. The final words echoing through the recording were imbued with a profound peace that transcended any physical limitation he had faced. It was the voice of someone who had discovered the most fundamental truth of existence, that consciousness is eternal, that love is the most powerful force in the universe, and that every soul is on a journey of return to the cosmic home from which it never truly separated. Death was not an end, but an awakening. Life was not a struggle, but a sacred opportunity, and every moment, including the most difficult, were precious gifts from an infinite intelligence that loved each of its creations beyond any human comprehension. When silence finally fell after the recording's last words, those privileged to hear it were left not with scientific questions about black holes or singularities, but with a deep certainty about the immortal nature of their own consciousness and the sacred purpose of their journey through physical existence. Stephen Hawking offered more than theories. He offered hope, transcendence, and the promise that our true cosmic adventure was only just beginning.